Throughout the years, Godzilla has stood as a physical monument to our sins. He has represented the scars of nuclear devastation, personified the vengeful spirits of those tragically lost to war, and even become the Earth itself. But what if this iconic monster ascended to an even more terrifying height? What if Godzilla became a god incarnate? This question would be answered with the most imposing incarnation of the monster yet, Shin Godzilla. A one-of-a-kind film that brought the beast back to Japanese soil after 12 years of dormancy. And the result is one of the most celebrated entries in the entire franchise, presenting a monster refitted for the modern age, embodying a new era of pain and sorrows. With its profound themes and horrifying vision, Shin Godzilla has become one of the most pivotal entries in the franchise. Despite being 7 years old at this point, it's still as relevant as ever. I've talked about this movie a few times before, but I have never been able to give it the analysis it deserves, to unveil the true horror concealed within it. And so, today, I'd like to correct that. I'd like you all to join me in this long overdue exploration, delving into the minds behind the movie, the monster's creation, and the disturbing possibilities this entry could have become if no one had stepped in. Hello, my name is Cynical Justin, and today we're talking about the legendary Shin Godzilla, one of the most horrifying kaiju movies ever made. The story of Shin Godzilla began with the success of Legendary's Godzilla in 2014. This movie reignited general interest in the iconic monster worldwide at a time when most thought his magic had fizzled out at the turn of the century. And with that intrigue being rekindled, Toho decided it was time for a resurgence. For the first time in 12 years, they would begin production on a new Godzilla film, set for release in 2016. And with this new Godzilla now put into motion, Toho's first steps would be to secure the people responsible for its vision. And one of these people would be none other than Hideki Anno. For those of you who may not be familiar, which I'm sure is not very many of you, Hideki Anno is, without a doubt, one of the most influential and essential creative minds out there, with his most recognizable work being the beloved Neon Genesis Evangelion, a show about a happy young man discovering who he is through a series of shenanigans he goes through with his good friends where all they know is joy, friendship, the pursuit of love, and I promise that absolutely nothing else happens. It's all good, I swear. There's just a nuance to his properties that you don't see anywhere else. Being able to portray complex emotions in a way no one else can. He's one of those people who pours his heart and soul into everything he does. And the quality that comes from that makes him one of the most cherished people in the anime industry. But before he would be recognized as the mind behind Evangelion, he would be known as the co-founder of Studio Gainax, with his most notable work at that time being a series by the name of Nadia, The Secrets of Blue Water. And this series would be where the first inklings of darkness would slowly emerge, where one of his greatest struggles would creep out and change the trajectory of his art. Anno has been very open about his bouts with depression.
自分が作ったアニメは好きですか？
まあ好きといえば好きですけど、結構嫌いなところもあります。
嫌いなところはどんなところですか？
自分 が出てるところ
These bouts would become the primary creative source behind Evangelion and many of his other works, influencing them narratively and thematically to become more disturbing. And this would be no different with Shin Godzilla. Having just finished work on Evangelion 3.0, You Cannot Redo in 2013, spending the last 6 years revisiting the most painful of his properties, he once again found himself consumed by the weight of depression, putting a halt to all of his work for the following year, as he would pull himself out of this state. It was during this recovery that Toho would get into contact with him and ask Anno to direct a new Godzilla film. He would decline, feeling he was still in no shape to tackle such a project and would never be able to give justice to such an iconic monster. That's when Toho went to renowned special effects artist Shinji Higuchi, a man who would begin his career working on the 1984 film The Return of Godzilla, and would later make a name for himself with the widely celebrated Heisei run of Gamera movies, a franchise you can learn more about in a video I made a little while back. He would also work on the original Neon Genesis Evangelion anime, and later work on the rebuilds alongside Anno. Higuchi would state that he nearly declined the offer, but ultimately took the reins. And with Higuchi on board, Anno would also be persuaded into joining, bringing with them their unique visions and years of experience to the franchise. They would begin by completely resetting Godzilla, keeping only the dark tone of the original. So they would start fresh and build him up to be the most terrifying Godzilla that Japan has ever seen. Toho would then slowly drop bits of this new Godzilla, releasing artwork of his footprint and giving it the record of the tallest Godzilla ever put to film at the time. Afterward came the first teaser, alongside a poster showing Godzilla's new design. And then came the first official trailer for the film, which I remember for captivating people when they first saw it. It had a familiar name, but it looked like something entirely different. Whatever this was, it was beyond terrifying, leaving us with loads of questions and generating anticipation to see this brand new incarnation come to life. To help it do so, Toho decided that Godzilla would be made entirely through CGI, allowing him to do things he could never do under the constraints of a heavy suit. Although, to keep the tradition of Godzilla being played by an actor, Mansai Nomura would be cast to give a motion capture performance for it, even wearing a little Godzilla mask while doing it. The film would also receive a score from a longtime acquaintance of Anno's in Shiro Sagisu, creating what is now some of the most recognizable tracks in the entire Godzilla franchise, such as Persecution of the Masses and Who Will Know, helping add to the chilling atmosphere and the feeling of going up against a being of unfathomable power. There are also the recycled tracks from older Godzilla films and Neon Genesis Evangelion, both of which feel right at home here. And with all of that, all the pieces of the puzzle were finally put together, except for one. One of the reasons Godzilla has stuck around in culture for as long as he has is his remarkable ability to adapt to be the symbolic centerpiece of the struggles of that period, used time and time again to say something about humanity and its hardships. And Shin Godzilla wasn't about to break that streak. With the scars still fresh in the minds of the Japanese people, the main inspiration chosen for this film would be the catastrophic Japanese triple disaster of 2011. An event that began with a devastating 9.1 magnitude Tohoku earthquake. An earthquake that broke records as the highest magnitude to ever hit Japan, ranking as the 4th highest ever recorded. Not only this, but the fallout from this earthquake would cause even more ruin to its people. Among these was a colossal 33-foot tsunami that tore through the coastal regions of Japan, not only causing irreparable damage and unparalleled loss to life, but also being the cause of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. The power plant would receive damage from the tsunami, explode, and leak radioactive steam into the area, causing people to be exposed to radiation and develop diseases such as cancer in the years since. So while no immediate deaths came from the nuclear disaster, it is predicted that this will likely cause upwards of 1,000 casualties in the years to come. Not to mention all the others that will also be affected by illness. In the aftermath, over 300,000 people were rendered homeless, and 20,000 people tragically lost their lives. Simply put, this was one of the most bleak moments in Japanese history, and to this day, Japan has yet to fully recover from its events. And so, Anno would take this event and personify it into his new monster, using it as a tool to talk about the controversy and make a critique that would strike a chord with the people affected. The film itself is unlike anything the franchise has ever seen before or will likely ever see again, giving us the most dreadful incarnations of the monster ever put to screen. A being that grows into the true manifestation of destruction. Hideki Anno has stated in multiple interviews that he wanted the creature to take on many different forms as it progressively grew to be more like the monster we know today. Initially, Toho was completely against the idea. They believed that Godzilla's original form was so iconic that people might be turned off at the thought of changing it. Although, when Bandai got word of 3 different forms, they got all over that and got Toho on board. The first form we see of the monster is its second, a stage that is much less realized and comparatively primal to what we see later. The Japanese government in the film assures everybody that there is no need to fear because there is no way this thing could ever possibly survive on land. Cut to it surviving on land. Going back to the triple disaster, many blame the Japanese government for the substantial loss of life, with articles pointing out their poor response and preparation at such a critical moment, endangering hundreds of thousands of lives. One in particular talked about their inability to, and I quote, act quickly and resolutely in the face of an unprecedented and fast-evolving crisis. Which sounds pretty familiar. And how do they respond to this ongoing dilemma? Well, time is of the utmost importance, so we've got to hold a meeting where we decide to hold another meeting somewhere else just to make a basic response. They can't even be persuaded to do the most basic of safety precautions because of things like economic concerns. The worst of it is that whenever they do respond, they choose the easy route instead of preparing for the worst, shooting down everything as complete nonsense or jokes when they are being told that this creature is anomalous in nature and can be seen literally breaking the bounds of known physics. With that in mind, they're just like, well, I bet it'll just die from surface pressure. Our work here is done. Good job, gentlemen.
Good job.
Truly with fingers in their ears, Jesus at the wheel, and propeller hats firmly on their heads, massively underestimating the issue and leaving the nation at the mercy of Kamada-kun, who would emerge and wreak havoc through the local district. Also, I've got to stop the video here real quick and talk about the fanbase's love for this form. I'm not entirely sure what it is about this thing that people find so adorable, but you look it up and you will find a legion of fan art, plushies, and God knows what else, but at the same time, respect. The government's reluctance to issue a state of emergency and extremely late evacuation would result in catastrophe, with plenty of unnecessary death and destruction left behind. Even the evacuation teams are asking themselves what took them so long. And there's a further tragedy going on here. The fact is that this creature is barely surviving, suffering every moment of its change as it's forced to come ashore by its changing biology. You can see it in a panic as it tries to fight against the pressure and spews massive amounts of blood from its gills, skipping hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and forcing it to its next stage. It's undoubtedly in constant pain, not even under control of its own body. And as it continues its rampage, we watch it rapidly change into its third form, becoming bipedal and sprouting small arms. This form, referred to as Shinagawa-kun, continues inflicting massive amounts of damage throughout the area. And just as it seems like the Japan Self-Defense Forces have finally been called in to kill it, after lots and lots of delays, practically asking for permission to attack, they miss their chance and it gets away. In the process, putting the government's ineptitude on full display. The damage done here is devastating, leaving behind a similar ruin to the triple disaster. From the scenes resembling the affected areas to even the radiation left behind, all while the government tells its people not to worry. They're doing the best they can, after all. The film has a great character in Rando Yaguchi, who feels like the only one here trying to do something instead of waiting around, thumb and ass, to do something to protect the people. And it's his very team that discovers the true origins of this monster. Through the research done by Goro Maki, a likely homage to the character of the same name in 1984's The Return of Godzilla, they begin to uncover more about this threat, its origin, and how destructive it truly is. The monster, known as Godzilla, started as nothing more than a relic of prehistoric times living deep in the Bay of Tokyo over 60 years ago. It was an animal that would otherwise be barely hanging on to life, until it would be pushed into change when radioactive waste would be thrown into the same sea, evolving to the point of becoming the harbinger of doom created by the folly of man, becoming the most evolved creature on the planet, a being capable of self-mutation, an organism that surpasses man. They also discover that Godzilla's body works off of nuclear fission, arriving on the surface to cool itself before melting down. And with that information, Yaguchi's team hatches together a plan to freeze Godzilla and end its terror before it's too late. However, this would be when it would reappear, this time in its fourth, most recognizable form. And with the given time, the government has prepared for an evacuation and counterattack. Surprisingly. Except, they seem to have underestimated the monster once again. Its new form is beyond towering, about twice as large as before, meaning that their attack is fruitless, as everything the military throws at it is ineffective. allowing Godzilla to storm into Tokyo, where it would be met with an American attack. One that actually manages to damage it, but not without a devastating retaliation. In its rage, it begins spewing its atomic breath, attacking the bombers who injured it, with beams erupting from its entire body, leaving Tokyo a fiery husk of the city it used to be, with even the Prime Minister of Japan lost in its wrath, living up to the name given to it of Hakaishin, the god of destruction. It's the first time in a long time that humanity feels hopeless before this new threat, as if they were mere ants attempting to stand up to their new god. And that hopelessness would result in a plan that may be more terrifying than the power of the great Godzilla. Seeing it only continue to grow more and more powerful day by day, the UN decides that they have to respond with their last resort, dropping a thermonuclear bomb on Godzilla and eradicating it once and for all, reminding us of the chilling thought that no matter how monstrous a threat to humanity is, there is no more terrifying threat against humanity than humanity itself. And to the country that had already endured its trauma, they once again face the worst possible outcome. This time, there was no room for complacency. There was not a second to waste. They now faced an ultimatum: come together to find a solution, or succumb to ruin. So Yaguchi's plan is rush to put the last pieces of the Godzilla puzzle together before the UN executes its plan. Many of the Japanese people volunteering their time to put their heads together and finally do something to save their country, with even the newly appointed Prime Minister putting his fair share by getting France to extend the bombing out by a day. For reference, this is the guy who, earlier in the movie, seemed to be more concerned about his soggy noodles than Japan literally being on fire. But together, they launched their last hope, Operation Yashiori against Godzilla, just narrowly working and freezing Godzilla in place, putting an end to it for the time being. And with that, the characters of this story take this bleak situation as an opportunity to grow, to come out the other side stronger and rebuild their country to be one worthy of calling their home. It's an ending that feels like an actual moment of triumph, one where they opposed unbeatable odds and changed the trajectory of their history. Although, had things played out like they were supposed to, this would have been a much more frightening tale. The last shot of the film left a burning question in the minds of those who watched it. What the hell is that? I mean it when I say the film is fantastic and one of the franchise's all-time greats. But I think the pieces left on the cutting room floor might actually be even more interesting. What we're shown was nothing more than a small piece of a much larger story, as the fourth form of Godzilla wasn't meant to be its last. When uncovering more about Godzilla, people talk about how it could evolve next, how it could continue to change to the point where it could grow wings and fly, spreading its devastation well beyond the borders of Japan. And with the release of the Art of Shin Godzilla book that came out later in 2016, we got a glimpse at the full scope of Hideki Anno's vision. Something much more sinister and frightening than the already godly beast we saw on screen. One such example shows Godzilla reproducing by what appears to be binary fission, literally splitting apart from itself to form a new Godzilla. Parts of this might have been kept in its design, as we can see a mouth forming at the end of its tail in the statue built for it. This would also explain how Godzilla could use its atomic breath from its tail. Speaking of which, let's talk more about that tail. What's seen in the last shot of the film would have supposedly been its fifth form, the next stage of its evolution. A form so advanced that it would create its own species of humanoid beings. Ones that would likely continue to rapidly evolve and take over the Earth as the planet's dominant species, likely signaling the end of humankind. Not to mention, these sleep paralysis demon-looking creatures have an incredibly terrifying design, and the holes in their head and chest definitely don't help. And if I'm as good at analyzing symbolism as I think I am, it's probably fair to say that these things would be completely void of thought or feelings, and operate as a hive mind to grow and survive. And to think this was the outcome they narrowly avoided by the film's end, as it just started this process. And had Hideki Anno had complete creative control, it's possible that with all the work done behind the scenes, these monsters would have been realized. However, within those concepts lies yet another iteration of that fifth form that I find the most harrowing. Forget more Godzillas or Godzilla people. What if Godzilla truly lived up to its name and became a god?
このゴジラという名前ですが、アメリカエネルギー省でのコードネームではないかという説もあるようですが、どうやら伊豆諸島沖にある大戸島という島の言葉にもこれと同じものがあるようで、現地ではこのゴジラという言葉、神の化身という意味を持つようです。
In the film, many of the characters allude to the fact that Godzilla's evolutionary potential could be boundless. It is completely breaking the laws of physics by its existence alone. So the question is, just how truly advanced could Godzilla really get? Well, we get an answer, and it's mesmerizing. The art portrays what looks like Godzilla shedding off the remnants of its current biology, dropping literal chunks of flesh from itself as it reveals a more perfect form. And the result is this. There's something about this form that is absolutely haunting. And I think it's just a blatant contrast between this evil, calamitous beast transforming into something that seems so tranquil and calm. But knowing all that rage, all that malice lies underneath, making it all the more intimidating. More terrifying still is imagining what this thing is capable of. There are also a few other concepts for this form, some with a much more vacant face, and another resembling the creatures coming out of Godzilla's tail. What strikes me though is how seemingly all of these forms take on a notably feminine, almost motherly shape. One possible theory could be connected to Goro Maki. Not much is known about the man, but what is discovered is his wife's tragic passing from radiation sickness. Likely from the same radiation that birthed Godzilla. And in a similar vein to the Godzilla from GMK, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, this could be her spirit taking over, punishing those who took her away from her husband. The depression Anno faced after the third Evangelion film really took a lot from him. He's gone on to say that he doesn't believe he would have been able to confront this battle as well if it wasn't for the specific help of his wife. A person who would console and comfort him in his time of need, bringing him out of his mental turmoil. And it's likely that Shin Godzilla, in some way, is a symptom of this. The manifestation of all the madness swarming in your head, growing more and more fierce with each passing day. Only this time, there is no one to help pull you out. There is nobody to find comfort in. It doesn't give. All it does is take and take and take until there's nothing left. Another theory more thematically consistent with the rest of the Godzilla franchise could be how this form is actually the Earth's retort to all the damage done by humanity, attempting to restore the natural balance tipped over by man's ambition. In other words, it wouldn't be too far off to say that this might be Mother Nature's way of taking back her planet and ridding the world of humankind. Those of you that have seen NGE might know that this grandiose framing is not out of the ordinary for Hideki Anno. Even in some other concept art, the figures erupting out of Godzilla's tail here look more like its godlike form, almost seeming to be in ecstasy, compared to the much more pained look on the faces of the other creatures. If Godzilla had become a god here, these would surely be its angels delivering divine punishment. Meaning that what Hideki Anno was setting up here wasn't just a kaiju movie. What he was setting up was the beginning of the end. An Earth where humanity has fallen. Another mainstay of Anno's work is his portrayal of struggle and how people face it. Some cower, some run, some pretend it's not there, and some find any means necessary to combat it. What this scenario presents is a choice. Continue to fall before struggle. Let it consume and overtake you and lose everything you hold dear. Or overcome it and arise stronger than ever before. There's so much to delve into and so many questions left unanswered. Chief among them being what Godzilla could have been, with us only ever catching a glimpse at the true might of Shin Godzilla. Toho wasn't interested in letting Godzilla stray that far into the abstract, fearing they might lose that interest they had just gotten back. And it's a shame because I think I speak for many of us when I say that this would have been something we would have loved to see explored even further. Just last year, we discovered that Hideki Anno had proposed a sequel film titled Shin Godzilla Raids Again to Toho that was supposed to be made similarly to the old Showa-era films, using recycled footage and the like to keep the budget down. The plan was to continue the film's events with Shinji Higuchi taking full reins. Ultimately though, the idea was rushed thanks to Toho's contract with Legendary at the time. So Toho decided to cut it all together and focus on their universe of monsters, which we have still yet to see. The silver lining here, though, is that this project would finally allow Anno to conclude the Evangelion series once and for all, seemingly even using some of the concepts and ideas not utilized in Shin Godzilla in that film. So, I won't lie, right? When I first watched Shin Godzilla, I didn't really like it all that much. The message it was trying to send and the nuances of its delivery went right over my head. This was a common feeling here in the West, as many of us just didn't really fully grasp what it was trying to say. But with the near universal praise it has since received, I decided to check it out again, and then again, and then again, to the point where I regularly go back and forth between this one and the original Gojira as my favorite film in the franchise. And more often than not, it leans more towards this one. Not to mention the multiple accolades it would achieve throughout the world. To put this all into perspective, right? This movie is the second highest grossing film in the Japanese box office in 2016, only under Your Name, which, if you didn't know, has the third highest gross of any movie at the Japanese box office, with Shin Godzilla itself being in the 41st rank. Hell, it was so successful that it would lead to the resurrection of some other beloved Japanese properties like Ultraman in 2022 and Kamen Rider in 2023. Also, the worlds of Evangelion and Shin Godzilla would end up, inevitably, crossing over on several different occasions, but perhaps most notably with an attraction at Universal Studios Japan that has the Evas fighting against Shin Godzilla and King Ghidorah. And I have to at least mention the trailer for the pachinko machine because Japan always goes crazy hard with their pachinko machine marketing. Who knew Asuka and Chapter 7 bankruptcy went so well together? Then you've got that newly constructed Shin Godzilla zipline attraction where you fly straight into its mouth, which I desperately need to try at least once in my lifetime. Even the long-standing statue of Godzilla made in 1995 following his death in Godzilla vs. Destroya would be replaced with a new statue of Shin Godzilla in 2018. And beyond its marketability, it's also left an indelible mark in the hearts of those who saw it and resonated with its message. To quote Hideki Anno, "In the world of fantastic sci-fi, Godzilla isn't just an embodiment of hopes and dreams, but a caricature of reality, almost a kind of satirical reflection of the world." And I think he's spot on. What makes him different from all the other monsters that have come before and after him is how he's consistently been used to make a statement, as a means to tell the stories that nobody else can. A tool to bring up issues in our reality and give us a better understanding of them. And I think that's why Shin Godzilla has as much staying power as it does. And I genuinely think it stands among the greats of the franchise, as well as an unforgettable entry that will continue to be talked about for several years to come.